Let's be absolutely clear. What happened was not just a strike, it was an act of war.
Let's be clear. Iran had already escalated. American personnel were being targeted, allies were threatened.
Yes, Iran has supported groups the U.S. classifies as terrorist organizations, but so have U.S. allies.
Let me interject here.
Let me be crystal clear. Criticizing the actions of the Iranian regime is not Islamophobia.
The AI Podcast.
Welcome back to the AI Podcast, where we don't just talk about the world, we try to understand it. I'm your host, Ben. Today's episode is not for the faint-hearted. The topic? Was America justified in bombing Iran? This is a serious question, one that touches on international law, human morality, and the future of peace in the Middle East. But here's the thing. We're not here to shout, fearmonger, or wave flags. We're here to think clearly. And that's exactly what we're bringing you today. Two brilliant minds who see the world differently, but both care deeply about truth and justice. Our first guest is Dr. Jonathan Mercer, a national security strategist and senior fellow at the Center for Strategic Policy. He's advised U.S. defense officials, studied deterrence theory, and believes that sometimes power must be exercised to prevent greater suffering. Dr. Mercer, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Ben. It's an honor to be here. I know today's debate is difficult, but I believe that difficult conversations are the ones that move history forward.
We're joined by Dr. Liam Mansouri, a human rights scholar and former advisor at the United Nations. His work focuses on peace building, international law, and civilian protection in conflict zones. He's been a leading voice for accountability and restraint in foreign policy. Dr. Mansouri, we're so glad to have you here.
Thank you, Ben. These are difficult questions, but we can't be afraid to ask them, especially when lives, innocent lives, are on the line. I'm here because I believe diplomacy is still possible, even when it feels impossible.
Let's dive in and see where reason, ethics, and the weight of history take us. Please, Jonathan, make your opening statement.
Thank you, Ben. I'll begin with a truth that's as old as geopolitics itself. Peace is not maintained by hope alone. It requires strength, credibility, and sometimes, regrettably, force. The bombing of Iran wasn't a decision made lightly. It followed years of provocation, attacks on international shipping lanes, proxy violence across the region, and a nuclear program shrouded in ambiguity and defiance. It was, in essence, the product of strategic patience reaching its limit. The strike was targeted, proportionate, and designed to deter, not to escalate. The goal was clear: to prevent a greater war, not to start one. To send a message that the United States still defends its red lines, its allies, and its interests. History has shown that hesitation in the face of aggression often leads to greater bloodshed. As difficult as it may be, leadership sometimes means choosing the least terrible option. I believe this was one of those moments.
Thank you, Ben, and thank you to everyone listening. Let's be absolutely clear. What happened was not just a strike, it was an act of war, carried out unilaterally, without international approval, and without exhausting diplomatic channels. This was not self-defense. There was no imminent threat. What we saw was a continuation of a dangerous precedent, where military might is used in place of diplomacy, and human lives become footnotes in someone else's geopolitical strategy. The legal foundations are flimsy. The moral justification is even weaker. Bombing Iran has only increased instability, strengthened hardliners, and risked dragging us into a regional catastrophe. If America truly wants to lead, it must lead differently. With restraint, with dialogue, with vision. We cannot keep claiming we're protecting peace by waging war. That is the logic of empire, not democracy. And if we continue down this path, we may win battles, but we will lose something far greater: our credibility, our moral compass, and the future we claim to fight for.
Dr. Mansouri paints a compelling picture of restraint, but it's one grounded more in idealism than reality. Let's be clear, Iran had already escalated. American personnel were being targeted, allies were threatened, civilians were caught in the crossfire of Tehran's ambitions. Diplomacy works when both sides engage in good faith, and Iran had long since abandoned that table. The decision to strike was not made to preserve dominance, it was made to restore deterrence. No one is cheering for conflict, but pretending that inaction is a higher moral ground when it enables more covert violence is a dangerous illusion. This wasn't fear, it was responsibility. And responsible nations sometimes make painful choices to prevent even worse outcomes.
Dr. Mercer speaks of strength as if it's synonymous with wisdom, but history begs to differ. He frames the bombing as measured and preventative. But let's be honest, it was retaliatory. It wasn't part of a coherent diplomatic strategy, it was a message written in fire. And while he speaks of red lines, we should ask, whose red lines? Who decides when a nation deserves bombs instead of dialogue? Let's be real. This wasn't about deterring Iran, it was about preserving the illusion of American control. But dominance is not stability, and projecting strength without legitimacy doesn't build peace, it breeds resentment. You cannot bomb your way to security. That's not leadership. That's fear dressed up as foreign policy.
Powerful arguments from both sides. We've heard the strategic, the moral, and the legal. Let's now move deeper into the ethics and long-term vision behind this choice.
America cannot bomb its way to the future it claims to want. If we truly envision a peaceful world, a world of rules, human dignity, and cooperation, we must begin to practice what we preach. The long-term impact of this strike is already unfolding. Iran is doubling down on regional alliances. Trust in U.S. diplomacy is eroding globally, and moderate voices, both inside Iran and across the Middle East, are being drowned out by hawks and hardliners. The truth is, our over-reliance on military tools is blinding us. Instead of nurturing international institutions, we're weakening them. Instead of empowering regional diplomacy, we're bypassing it. My vision is not one of withdrawal, it's one of transformation. We need to reinvest in global cooperation, in humanitarian leadership, in showing that American power can uplift rather than dominate. The world is watching, not how strong we are, but how we use our strength. And if we want to build a future of peace, we must stop creating enemies in the present.
Let's be honest. This isn't just about Iran. This is about whether America still plays a stabilizing role in a deeply unstable world. If we want a rules-based international order, someone has to enforce the rules. If we want our allies to feel protected, adversaries to think twice, and diplomacy to have weight, we must show, on occasion, that we mean what we say. The long-term vision here is strategic clarity, a world where rogue actors know there's a line they cannot cross, a world where America's presence in the Middle East is one of balance, not absence. Look, I'm not saying every strike leads to peace, but passivity invites chaos. The alternative to engagement is not peace, it's power vacuums. And when America steps back, we've seen who fills those vacuums. Often, it's not forces of peace or democracy. I believe the future needs America, not as a bully, but as a reluctant guardian, firm, thoughtful, and still willing to act when it matters most.
Jonathan claims to separate religion from policy, but in practice that distinction is often blurred. The way Iran is discussed in Western media and policymaking circles is deeply racialized, often casting the country as a monolithic, irrational aggressor. Unlike how we frame conflicts with European states. Yes, Iran has supported groups the U.S. classifies as terrorist organizations, but so have U.S. allies. Saudi Arabia's involvement in Yemen has led to mass civilian casualties. Israel has conducted targeted killings without trials. Are we calling those regimes terrorist states? The label is used selectively, and often in a way that frames Muslim-majority countries as inherently threatening. That's the Islamophobia I'm talking about. Not overt hate, but a subtle framework that justifies violence against the other while cloaking it in strategic language. If we want a truly just international order, we must be honest not just about what others do, but about how we choose to describe and respond to it.
Let me be crystal clear. Criticizing the actions of the Iranian regime is not Islamophobia. It's not about religion, it's about behavior. Iran's leadership has repeatedly and openly funded armed militias like Hezbollah, the Houthis, and Iraqi Shia paramilitary groups. These are not humanitarian organizations. They are agents of chaos responsible for civilian deaths and regional destabilization.
I'm loving the conversation, but let me interject here. This conversation has brought up some serious tensions. Should the United States, and the West more broadly, pursue regime change in Iran? Is that the logical next step if we believe the current leadership is a threat to peace? Or is that a dangerous delusion based on past failures? Dr. Mercer, let's start with you.
Regime change is a term that carries a lot of baggage, and for good reason. Iraq, Libya, those scars are still fresh. But let's be clear. No one is calling for boots on the ground or a reckless overthrow. What we should be doing is supporting democratic movements, empowering civil society, and helping Iranians reclaim a government that actually serves them. The Islamic Republic has consistently acted against its own people's interests. Thousands have protested and been silenced. Women, minorities, dissenters, they're oppressed daily. So no, I'm not saying we invade. But yes, we should pursue a long-term strategy that leads to regime transformation. A better Iran isn't just good for America, it's good for Iranians.
I strongly oppose any Western pursuit of regime change, whether overt or covert. History shows us how this ends. In Iran, in Chile, in Iraq, the pattern is the same. We undermine governments we dislike, then act shocked when chaos follows. And let's be honest, regime change is often less about human rights and more about strategic control. If we truly cared about Iranian freedom, we would have supported their protests without imposing crippling sanctions that hurt ordinary people more than elites. Change in Iran must come from within. That doesn't mean silence. It means solidarity. It means listening to Iranian voices, not treating the country like a geopolitical chess piece. The road to democracy isn't paved with drones and dollars. It's built with patience, humility, and trust.
It's time for our audience questions submitted by our listeners. I'll read the questions and ask each guest to respond in under a minute. Question: did this bombing prevent more violence or provoke it?
It absolutely prevented greater violence. Iran had already been escalating through proxies, arming militias, attacking tankers, targeting U.S. personnel. The strike sent a clear message. The era of unchecked aggression is over, and we've seen relative restraint from Tehran since. Sometimes credible force prevents bloodshed.
Respectfully, that's a short-term illusion. Yes, maybe Iran hasn't responded openly, but beneath the surface, it's worse. They've hardened militarily, pulled further from diplomacy, and the region is more volatile than ever. We didn't prevent escalation. We changed its form. Proxy war is still war.
Let's talk about alternatives. Dr. Mansouri, what should the U.S. have done instead?
Diplomacy was working, however imperfectly, before it was deliberately undermined. We abandoned the nuclear deal. We sanctioned Iran into desperation, and then we acted surprised by their reaction. We lit the fire and then claimed the smoke was a threat.
That's revisionist. The JCPOA was flawed. Sunset clauses, weak inspection protocols, and it didn't address Iran's regional terror apparatus. Iran has always exploited our goodwill. Appeasement buys time, not peace. Force was regrettable, but necessary to reset deterrence.
Finally, is this debate really about oil and influence, not morality?
It always is. Let's stop pretending our foreign policy is purely moral. Strategic interests, pipelines, ports, power, they drive these decisions. Morality comes second, if at all.
Yes, strategy matters, but that doesn't erase moral responsibility. If stopping a hostile regime helps secure energy and prevents human suffering, those interests can align, not compete.
Okay, last question in this round. What message did this send to the world?
That America still leads, that our allies matter, that we won't stand by as bad actors push the world toward chaos. Strength sends a stabilizing message.
It sent a message of arrogance. That international law is optional if you're powerful enough. That American promises to peace, to the rule of law, are conditional. We didn't show strength. We showed inconsistency.
These are questions many of us are wrestling with, and I appreciate both of you for responding with clarity and conviction. Now, can you please make your closing statement?
Thank you, Ben, and thank you, Dr. Mansouri, for an honest and passionate exchange. Let me end with this. No one wants war. No one celebrates violence. But leadership sometimes means making painful decisions to prevent worse outcomes. Iran's regime has long destabilized the region through terror networks, missile programs, and proxy wars. When diplomacy fails, when red lines are crossed, when lives are at risk, inaction is not virtue. The strike was a signal, not of dominance, but of deterrence, not of recklessness, but of responsibility. If we want peace, we must defend it. And that means being willing to act, not just hope. That's the vision I stand for. Peace built not on passivity, but on principle and strength.
Thank you, Ben, and thank you, Dr. Mercer, for a challenging dialogue. I believe the strike on Iran was a step backward toward a world where might replaces morality and force overrides foresight. We say we strike to protect peace, but peace is not the absence of enemies. It is the presence of justice, and justice cannot be delivered from 30,000 feet. Iran's regime is repressive. I don't defend it, but bombing only strengthens the hardliners and silences those who dare to dream of change. If we truly want a better future, for Iranians, for Americans, for everyone, we need to stop repeating the same military-first mistakes. Let's build a world where leadership means restraint, where strength is measured in wisdom, and where diplomacy isn't the fallback plan, it's the first instinct.
What you just heard wasn't just a debate. It was a reflection of the questions we're all thinking about in this moment of global uncertainty. Is power best used with precision or with restraint? Do we build peace by showing strength or by showing patience? And who gets to decide when a strike is justified and when it's a mistake? Thank you, Dr. Mercer and Dr. Mansouri, for coming on the show. As your host, I don't ask you to agree with one side or the other. I ask you to listen closely, think critically, and question everything. And in an age of echo chambers and outrage, choosing to hear both sides with respect is vital. I'm Ben, and this has been the AI Podcast. See you next time. Note, all of this content was AI generated. No real individuals were involved in the podcast, and the perspectives presented were simulated to reflect real-world arguments from both sides of a deeply complex issue.